Hi, I'm Avery Davidson. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, the only TV show bringing Louisiana farmers and consumers together every week. My partner, Kristen Oaks-White, will join us a little later from the garden. There's a slow-moving crisis in Louisiana's soybean fields, a perfect storm, if you will. When September started, farmers were hoping to overcome the terrible market prices with what looked to be record-breaking yields. With nearly daily rains in many parts of the state, harvest has slowed to a crawl and mold is taking hold. As TWILA's Neil Melancon shows us, some farmers might not even harvest their soybean crop at all.
Last week, we went out to Clayton Hurdle's sugarcane farm where the crop is growing fairly well. Across the levee, inside the Atchafalaya Basin, Hurdle also has a soybean crop, which is also doing well.
Pretty good shape. Got most of the crop out, got a little bit left. I've got storage, so that helps a lot when you're talking about damage and some high moisture.
Hurdle's neighbors to the west, though, aren't nearly as lucky.
This is this field.
Here, Neil Fontenot is showing some of the damaged beans from his farm near Ville Platte. The constant rains have caused some of them to turn white with mold, as you can see here. He's showing it to Todd Spivey, a soybean expert with the LSU Ag Center, who says prior to Labor Day, we were on track for a bumper crop of soybeans in Louisiana.
A lot of the beans that were harvested in late August, really right around Labor Day, and in the first couple weeks of September, again, like I mentioned, they were really good. We saw some really good yields across the state, fields averaging in the 90s up north, fields averaging in the 60s and 70s on the cane ground. In the southwest part of the state, we heard some numbers as high as close to 50.
All of that changed with the nonstop September rains. Spivey said the rains have kept a third of the crop in the fields where it might stay permanently.
We're going to lose a lot of harvested acres there, and then those ones that are harvested, the yields are going to be way down and damage is going to be way up.
Richard Fontenot, who farms with his brother Neil, is one of those southwest Louisiana farmers facing severe damage.
Well, in September we went ahead and we sprayed our burn down, if you will, and defoliant. And in anticipation of coming in, our 14, 20 days after that, start harvesting. And when we did come in that time period, we've had 7, 8 days of consecutive rainfall. And the crop deterioration was so rapid that when we finally got here, we had a product that was no longer marketable.
Spivey says that when a crop is sprayed with the defoliant and it rains, the moisture has nowhere to go but into the seed pod, and that's where problems start.
The pods and the beans in the field, they'll still draw in some of that moisture. And with no leaves on the plant, with no really good way to move that water off, that plant just kind of sits there holding on to that water. And that's going to allow us some disease issues to set in. We'll see some beans begin to rot as they just sit there in that water, in that moisture.
The rot results in this, piles of soybeans that will stay in the field. What I can't show you is the smell of this rot, which pervades 1,000 acres of Richard Fontenot's land. 1,000 acres, he says, will likely be plowed under.
You got a big area in southwest Louisiana had the same dynamic impact. They had a few more rains as you travel a little southwest, but unfortunately their plight is similar to ours in terms of the rainfall and harvest delays and deterioration of crops in the field. We got a lot of farmers out there that have a lot of soybeans that will not be harvested this coming year, and it's going to have a dynamic impact in the southwest part of the state as well as other areas.
Fontenot is fortunate in that he has a second crop in rice, as well as on-farm storage that many farmers in Louisiana do not. Even with these assets, it's still going to be a tough year for him and across the state. For This Week in Louisiana Agriculture, I'm Neil Melancon.
A few hours after Neil shot that story, it started raining again on Fontenot's farm, a common scenario in Louisiana right now. Soybean farmers face additional challenges when they deliver their beans as the trade war with China is stalling barges on the river. The lack of markets and storage capacity is forcing grain elevators to make some tough decisions. Many aren't taking soybeans above a strict damage limit, usually around 5%. For many farmers like Fontenot, this is an impossible standard as nearly daily rains are causing more damage like you just saw. According to Greg Fox, a grain marketing specialist with the Louisiana Farm Bureau, many beans won't even leave the field.
A lot of crops could potentially be left in the field. A lot of lost income. You look at what the situation we were in last year, we had damage limits at a lot of elevators. granted 10 to 20% damage, and some locations were able to dump anything that came across. So they were able to get that stuff out. This year, 8 to 10% damage, and that's going to have to sit in the field. So it's heartbreaking.
Crops that farmers don't harvest have an additional effect. It disqualifies those farmers from receiving the aid from the USDA to counteract the price loss from the trade war with China. In order to qualify, farmers must either deliver a crop to an elevator or have their grain in storage. That prompted Louisiana 5th District Congressman Ralph Abraham to write this letter to USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue. In it, Abraham asked the Secretary to, quote, utilize the significant resources of the U.S. Department of Agriculture to find a way to bring relief to these farmers.
What we've asked Secretary Perdue to do is look at the current situation. It is an emergent situation. It's only going to get worse if we don't do something very, very quickly. So we've asked the Secretary to look at options, look at solutions. We certainly have offered some, and get this done, but get it done quickly.
Sadly, this situation will likely get worse as farmers in the Midwest and other areas begin harvest. As Fox said, it's a heartbreaking situation and we'll be following it as the season goes on.